Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. We're reading through the transcript of California versus Eric and Lyle Menendez on trial for the second time for Kitty and Jose, their mother and father. And we are going to continue in the defense's case for Erik Menendez. He's on the stand, and Barry Levin, who you can see on the screen below me, he is doing the questioning in lieu of Ms. Abramson this time around. So she did the questioning obviously in the first trial, and this time around Mr. Levin is doing the questioning. Before we get started, a real quick housekeeping item. Just so you're aware, well, first of all, two quick housekeeping items. Apologies for last week. I had Monday's video scheduled for Friday, but because YouTube, whenever you go to schedule a video, it automatically gives you the day ahead of time. So it gave me the next day and at midnight, and I forgot to change it to PM, and anyways, I screwed that up. So apologies. Now that one aired then Monday for you on Rumble. You actually did get it on Friday, and then you didn't get a Monday episode, if that makes sense. So to catch up. And now we're all caught up, so you guys should be on track, if that makes any sense. I apologize. It's been a crazy week with just Charlie Kirk. I kind of want to do a video on it, but I'm not sure if you guys even care. But I feel like the nation itself is mourning. And it's not even that, it's him or his ideas or whatever. It's just the way that our nation has come to such violence all the time. And it's just left me feeling heavy and hurting, for lack of a better word, grieving, just for the nation as a whole. So just kind of, it was a crazy week last week, and I was enthralled with, keeping up with the story on Wednesday, which therefore led to no video on Thursday. And then I screwed up Friday's video. So apologies. Now we're on Tuesday, all caught up. Episode 37 of the defense's case, Erik Menendez on the stand. Um, oh, one more item that I forgot. I will be going out of town. I'll tell you guys about it afterwards when I get back. But right now, just know that this week, Friday, there will be no video. And then all next week, there won't be any videos, just because I will be at a place where there is nowhere to record. So um, thank you guys for understanding. We will continue next week when I get back. I will make sure that we have Monday scheduled so I don't get behind. So I'll have that scheduled for that following week, whatever day it is. So we'll be back the 29th. Our shows will be back the 29th. I'll be back before that. But anyways, okay. So now that that is all out of the way, why am I being so slow? Okay. So let us get back into it. We are, I'm not ready. We're coming back from lunch here, from December 8th, and we had our noon break. We're coming right back. The following proceedings were held in open court outside the presence of the jury. So the court says, all right, the defendants are here as well as all counsel. There was something you want to talk about before we resume. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, there is an item of evidence that I may be introducing this afternoon, which is a large knife that I have brought to court and your deputies have taken custody of. I showed it to the prosecutors and they indicated they may wish to address the court before I use it as an exhibit in trial. How do you propose to use it? Asks the court. Mr. Levin says, I'm going to throw it and hopefully stick it. No, this exhibit is a weapon that was used by Jose Menendez against Erik Menendez. It's a large knife. And was he trying to make a joke? I don't know. Anyways, it was a bad joke if that's the case. He says this exhibit is a weapon that was used by Jose Menendez against Erik Menendez. It's a large knife. I hate when my highlighting isn't highlighting. And during an episode of Sex where Erik Menendez refused to go along with the demands placed upon him, Jose Menendez left the room and returned with this large knife and put it to the body of Erik Menendez and told him he would take his life if he ever resisted again. Court says, when did this happen? Mr. Levin says, this was a later incident that happened. Ms. Abramson says, 17. Mr. Levin says, in his teenage years, or sorry, yeah, in his teenage years, as I understand it, about 17. Ms. Abramson says, about a year before, Your Honor. The court says, what do you propose to have it at, do you propose to have it at the podium and show it to your client? Mr. Levin says, in any way that the court and the sheriff's department wish me to display it, I will, of course, comply. Court says, what's the people's position? You know they're going to object to that. Mr. Khan says, we would object under 352 that it's unduly inflammatory. Really? This piece of weaponry was used in a violent act against the defendant by the victims in this case. I guess Jose and Kitty have to be the victims because they're the ones that are dead. But in my opinion, I don't think they're victims in much sense of the word. But anyways, so he's saying it's unduly inflammatory because why? It's prejudicial. It makes people angry. It should. It should make you angry that Jose Menendez used a knife against his son to force him into sexual acts. That should enrage the jurors. But they don't want to they don't want to allow that. I mean, if it doesn't enrage you, you're not human. In light of the concession of the defendant that he did not take his parents' lives because his parents had molested him in any way, he would submit that using the knife in addition to relating the jury this particular episode is unduly inflammatory. Court says, is there some identification of this being the weapon or just an exemplar or what? Ms. Abramson says, no, it's the same one. Court says, we have one person talking. Unless you're a ventriloquist, we have one talking. The more and more we read this transcript, the more and more I dislike this judge. Mr. Levin says, depending on how close, I mean, if I stood back and I showed it to him, he would say, yes, it looks like it. If I showed it to him, I'm sure he'd be able to identify it. Quite frankly, he's been in custody, and I have not been able to actually show him the weapon, but I have reason to believe that it is the weapon. Mr. Khan says, well, I think that the court should first of all take a look at the weapon to see what we're talking about, and perhaps counsel should also make a determination as to whether or not there is going to be an identification. Court says, all right, as far as the objection on the grounds of it being inflammatory, this is demonstrative evidence relating to a specific incident and has relevance to that incident. I don't see it as being inflammatory per se. So that's good. The only question is whether or not this is a weapon that can be identified. I'll let the sheriff show it to the defendant and see if he can identify it, so you can do that now. Mr. Levin says, is that it, Erik? The defendant, Erik Menendez? Yes? Mr. Levin says he indicates that that's the weapon and he'll identify it. So they just asked him right there in court, not on the stand. or he might be still on. I don't know if they resumed his place on the stand yet or not, but they did it outside the presence of the jury, is what I mean. Court says, okay, then it can be displayed by counsel at the podium, but it will be brought over by the sheriff and then brought back by the sheriff. Bailiff Oland says, yes, sir. The court says, anything else before we resume? Mr. Levin says, no, Your Honor, not from the defense. The court says, okay, let's get the jury out. Let's get the defendant back on the witness stand. Okay, so he wasn't on the stand. And now the jury enters. The following proceedings are held. The court says, okay, the jury is back and will resume with the direct examination. Mr. Levin says, thank you. And that's where direct examination resumes. Mr. Levin asks, Mr. Menendez, there was a certain activity which you have come to call rough sex. Is that correct? Yes. And was there a certain type of activity that occurred in the bedroom between yourself and your father that caused you to call it rough sex? Yes. Did your father call it rough sex? No. Did your father call these acts of sex by any name? No. These were names that you attached to the specific acts, correct? Yes. When was the first act of rough sex? I don't remember. Approximately how old were you? 13, 12, 13, in the fall of my 13th year. And had this occurred following the acts of knees? Yes. Had it occurred after the acts of nice sex? Yes. Had it occurred after what you call sex? Yes. Would you describe to the jury what it is uh, that your father did to you that you labeled as rough sex? He would bring me into my bedroom. He would bring into my bedroom, sorry. He would bring into my bedroom a knife, rope, needles, tacks, candles, and he would use them on me. So tacks like thumbtacks, like you would put in a bulletin board or something. Now, did you know or do you have any recollection of the first time that rough sex occurred? No. Do you have in mind a specific incident or specific way of describing a typical act of rough sex? Can you envision it in your mind and see it? I know. I have pictures. I remember feelings. I remember images. What pictures come to your mind when you think of rough sex? Candles in the room, dancing shadows on the wall, my father's face. He's having a visceral memory. That's not something somebody making it up would come up with. FYI. Did you know that rough sex was going to occur before your father came into your room? No. Did you ever know what would occur before your father came into your room? No. And during an episode of what you have come to call rough sex, what would your father do with a knife? He would hold it against my skin. He would cut me with it. I would see it, and it would frighten me. And were you told to undress first? I was always naked. Would he undress himself? Yes. Would there be times when rough sex would take place and your mother would be home? I don't remember. How long would it take for an episode of rough sex? I don't remember. Was it longer and drawn out than the other types of sex? More drawn out than the knees or actual sex. Now, how would your father cut you with the knife? My thighs. Would he cut you deeply where you bled? Yes. What kind of knife was it? It was a kitchen knife. Would he say anything to you while he cut you? No. Did you understand why he was cutting you? I understood why these acts were taking place. And what did you understand to be the reason for these acts to be taking place? They were a type of pain training. Jose training him to take pain? What a freaking monster. What do you mean by pain training? My father said that I was weak, a coward, and too easily frightened and showed my pain too often. Did you cry when your father would cut you with a knife? Sometimes I would cry, but never overtly, never had tears in my eyes. But my father, his look, his expression, it just scared me, and I could not talk, and I wasn't allowed to express myself in any way. Wow. Describe the look on your father's face during this. I just remember his black eyes, his hair, and it was a look that would look right past me. It was very different from anything I have ever experienced in my father. What would you be feeling when you would see this look on your father's face? Terror. What would your father do with the rope? He would tie my penis and my testicles with it. Monster. And when you say he would tie your penis and your testicles with them, what do you mean? He would wrap it around my penis and under my testicles. How do you know, or do you know why he did that? No. Did it hurt? Yes. Did you ever tell him to stop? Never. Did you resist him? No. Why not? I don't know. I was just used to not resisting him ever. Because he trained himself not to resist his father because he would get more wrath from his father if he resisted or cried or showed emotion or fear or tears, anything, any kind of emotion. Jose would react even more negatively. What did you do with the, I'm sorry, what did he do with the needles? He would stick them in me. Was there any specific thing that was happening when he would stick the needles in you? Often, I'd be giving him oral sex. And would this occur on the bed? Yes. You were on the bed. I was laying back against the back of my bed, and his legs spread, and I was in between them. Now, would he tell you what to do, or was it just a thing that you understood that when he got on the bed like you described, that you would have to come between his legs? It was a combination. Now, when you would be copulating him, where would he stick you with the tacks and the needles? In my thighs and my butt. He would be reaching down behind you and sticking you? Yes. And did that hurt? Yes. Did you react? I was not supposed to. I reacted in small ways. Did your Never in a way that I wanted to draw his attention. Did your father ever hit you during acts of rough sex? No. What kinds of emotions would your father show while he was performing rough sex with you? The only emotion I ever remember, what I specifically remember, is the lack of emotion. He would, if I made a sound, he would whip his head around and look right at me. It was a it was as though he was looking through me. I remember him grunting. I don't remember any other emotion. Would he do things to you during rough sex other than you described? Yes. What would he do to you? He would massage my penis, give me oral sex, sometimes stick things in me. You say stick things in you. What do you mean? He had a knotted rope that he would put inside of me. Put inside where? In my butt. And what would he do? He would slowly pull it out of me. And How did this make you feel? What were you thinking about yourself during this time? I remember watching from above the bed. I remember leaving myself and my emotions and trying just to drown out everything and to not feel anything, and I got good at it. I only have the pain of the feeling in my memory. I only have specific flashes. These are not things that I remember in great detail and sequence. So at the time of trial number two, which is 1996, crime happens in 89 when the parents' lives were taken. So at this point in time, he still doesn't have full memories, and he probably never will if he's blocked some of it out completely. I'm sure some of it's come back since then while he's been doing his healing and therapy and work on himself in prison, his rehabilitation in prison. I'm sure these memories have come back to him more and more, and those are memories that he didn't want to remember, I'm sure. So just remember that even the things that the horrific things that he's telling you now, there could be worse things that he didn't remember at this time that may not have come out in trial. So he may have memories that are suppressed that we may never know. The horrific, evil reaches of Jose Menendez and what he was capable of. What would your father do with the candles? He would light them and put them around the room on my nightstands, on my dressers, and on the floor. Lots of candles? Yes. Did this produce a certain effect with respect to the lighting in your room that you have a specific recollection of? Yes. And what do you recall feeling during that time? That and I take it that the lights would be out. Yes. What kinds of feelings would you have? What kinds of images would it produce with the lights, with the candles burning in your room? Objection irrelevant. Overruled. The shadows of both myself and my father, flickering shadows on the wall. Jose did it so he could watch himself abuse his own child. That's my opinion and speculation, but I think, and to force his own child to watch as it happened. I think it was twofold. It was so that he could watch himself doing these horrific things to his own child, and so that he could force his son to watch as well. What an awful, awful man. And anyone claiming, oh, the brothers are horrible, evil monsters and they should never be let out. Think of this moment right here. He put up candles everywhere in the room so he could see himself abusing his own child in some of the most horrific ways possible. How long, in terms of from when it first occurred in your memory to the last act of what you have described as rough sex, how long of a period did it occur? It was no longer occurring than when I moved to Princeton. It was no longer occurring when I moved to Princeton, so it's the rough sex stopped. And that was when you were how old? 15 and a half. Is that right? Is it what was the question? How long in terms of from when it first occurred in your memory to the last act? So, yeah, when he moved to Princeton it stopped and he was 15 and a half. Do you know why it stopped? No. Did it occur over a period of years? 2 years, I guess. What was the most frequent form of sex with your father that you had? Knees. And what would be the next most frequent form of sex? Nice sex. And then sex? No. Then which kind? I don't remember how often rough sex occurred. Nighttime sex occurred more than actual sex. You just said nighttime sex. What is nighttime sex to you? It was when he would come into my room in the middle of the night when he had gotten back from a long trip. When you say middle of the night, what time are you referring to? It was after I went to bed, 11, midnight, 1. 2, any time in the middle of the night when he's sleeping, I guess. Was your father on these occasions frequently gone on some kind of business trip or business engagement? On what occasions? Nighttime sex. Would it occur when he was already home, or did it seem to occur when your father was away, either on business or just away from the house? I remember it. I remember the anxiety that it was going to happen when he got back, often from Europe or from California when we lived in New Jersey. Did it also happen on certain nights when he had gone out for the evening, like business associates or something like that? It may have. I don't remember. Would it be a situation where nighttime sex would occur after you went to bed and when your father was not home? I don't understand what you're asking. In other words, those times when nighttime sex took place, would the situation generally be on those nights when you went to bed when your father was not home? Yes. When your father was not home on every occasion, did you fear him? Or have fear, sorry. When your father was not home, every time that he was not home, did you have fear? I only had fear when I knew that he would be coming home that night. What was it that you were afraid of? Him coming into my room when he got home. Did you have any way of knowing, Mr. Menendez, when you went to bed for the night and your father was not home, and you knew that he was coming home, whether he would or would not enter your room when he got home? I had no idea. Did you have any idea what time he would come home and enter your room? Sometimes I knew what time he'd be arriving home from the airport. I'd ask my mother, and she'd say at midnight, or he'll be arriving home at 2 a.m., and so then I'd know. Often I'd wait up if he was getting back from a long trip to see him come home. I had a window that overlooked the driveway. He probably stayed awake in fear and panic all night long, waiting for that moment. Was it a frequent occurrence where you would go to bed, your father was gone for the evening, but you knew that he was going to come home that night? Did that happen often? I'm sorry. Did it happen often when you went to bed and your father was not home and you knew that he was going to be coming home? My father didn't sleep at home. I'd say 2 nights a week. He would be on business trips. He'd sleep over in New York. When you knew that he was away on business or away on certain other activities, did you sleep better? Yes. And was it often? I'm just trying to determine if it was an often frequent occurrence where you would go to sleep, your father wasn't home when you went to sleep, and you knew before you went to sleep that your father wasn't going to be coming home. Did that happen often? Once or twice a week. During those times when your father entered your room or didn't enter your room, did you have difficulty sleeping on those particular nights? Sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. I wouldn't expect my father to come into my room if he had left earlier in the day and was just arriving late from New York. Okay, and you said that you would look out the window. Was the window of your room positioned in a way that you could see the driveway? Yes. And how often would you look out your window? Objection, irrelevant under Evidence Code Section 352. The court says, okay, we've been going over this quite a bit here. Now let's move on. What would happen when your father would enter your room? I would wake up with the sound usually the sound of the door closing. Did that mean that something had occurred to you when you heard that sound? Objection, vague. Court says it is vague. Why don't you ask it differently? Did the sound of your door closing mean anything to you? Objection, vague and irrelevant. Other than the fact that the door had been opened and closed? Mr. Levin says just the fact that he heard the noise. The court says, did it have any specific significance to him? Is that what you're asking? Yes. Overruled. I'd know that my father, when I'd wake up, I wouldn't know immediately that it was my father, just that my door had closed and that somebody was in the room. and I'd hear him walking towards the bed. What would he do when he got to you? Objection vague as to time. You're asking him every time the same thing happened or what? Yes. Do you understand that's the question? Says the court. The witness says yes. You can answer it. The witness says he would put his hand on my body or my face. To locate my face, he would unbuckle his pants and he would pull out his penis. Sometimes he would reach underneath the cover and touch me, whatever he felt like doing. And what kind of sex would he want you to perform? Objection vague as to time. You're asking again on all these occasions? Mr. Levin says, on all these occasions, was there a specific type of sex that he would have you perform? Yes. What type was that? Oral sex. Would he ejaculate? Sometimes. How old were you when you first remember your father coming into your room at night in the way that you described? 13, I was 14, and I was 15. The last type of sex you had with your father had the last type of sex that your father had had with you, you said was days before his death. Is that correct? Yes. What type of sex was that? Knees. And what type of sex occurred before that? Sorry? Was there an act of sex that occurred soon in time before the last act of sex that you just described, that you just told us about? Yes. And when did that act occur? When I was at the clay courts at, I don't remember the name of the city, end of summer. What type of sex occurred there? Knees and nice sex. Now, sex then with your father, molestation that your father performed, did not only occur in the bedroom of the various homes where you resided. Is that correct? Right. Where else did these things happen? The shower, hotel rooms, vacation. Was it more frequent that it happened at your house? Most frequent at one of your houses where you resided in your bedroom? Yes. And with respect to when it occurred in your house, you indicated that it occurred also in the shower. How often would your father have sex with you in the shower? Infrequently. What would your father want you to do or make you do or tell you to do in the shower? Oral sex. And how would he indicate to you that he wanted you to perform an act of oral sex with him? He would normally tell me. And would you comply? Yes. How old were you? How old were you when you took showers with your father during that period? During what period of your life? What time in your life? From the time I was born to the time I was 18. Forced to shower with his father for his entire life, up until 18 years old. Did your father ever do anything with respect to shaving you? Yes. What did he do? He would cut my pubic hair down and sometimes shave it off. When you say he would cut it down, cut it with scissors? Yes. How old were you when he cut your pubic hair with scissors? Sixth grade, 13, 12, 13, 14. And how old were you when he stopped doing that? Stopped before Princeton. Did it on more than one occasion? Yes. Was there any reason that he ever gave you as to why he was cutting the pubic hairs? No. And how often did he shave you? Sometimes he would just cut my hair with the scissors. Sometimes he would shave it. Sometimes he would do both. I don't know how often he'd shave it. Now, during the time that your father was sodomizing you, did he ever hit you? What do you mean by hit? Well, did he ever slap you or hit you for any reason while he was sodomizing you or trying to sodomize you? Yes. And when did that occur? When I was crying. How old were you? The first time it happened was when I was 12. It happened again when I was 17, and I don't have specific recollections of other times. Do you recall the first time that your father sodomized you? Yes. Tell the jury what happened. My father came into my room. I was home alone with him. He put a slate underneath the door. He closed the blinds and told me to take off my clothes and bend over the footboard, and I did so. First of all, you mentioned the slate. What do you mean by a slate? There was a wooden board that I had many under my bed, and one was kept behind the door, and he would put it underneath the door to the floor, and it would jam the door closed. So nobody, even if they tried to come in, they wouldn't be able to get in. Underneath the door handle to the floor? Yes. He wouldn't tell you to do that, or he would tell you to do that. No, he would do it himself. What kind of sled or slate was this? A wooden one. What happened after you barricaded the door? I didn't barricade the door. What happened after your father barricaded the door? He got undressed and he got on the bed. What happened then? He would put the Vaseline he had bought into the room on me and on him, and he entered me. And did it hurt? Oh, yes. Did you cry out in pain? Yes. How did it hurt? Needles and cutting me open felt like I was being torn in two. What did you want your father to do? I asked him to stop. How did you ask him to stop? I said, please, Daddy, you're hurting me. Please stop. Did you think your father wanted to hurt you? Objection calls for speculation. Overruled. The witness says, I wasn't sure anymore. Mr. Levin says, did your father stop? No. What did he do? Continued. And did this happen on more than one occasion where he would sodomize you and it would hurt and you would tell him to stop? No. Was there a reason why it didn't happen on more than one occasion? Yes. Why? Because after this occasion with my because after this occasion my father told me why he had continued, and I vowed when I was in the bathtub afterwards never to resist, never to fight, never to cry out. Why did your father tell you that he continued? He told me because that I had been screaming and crying and had been pleading with him to stop. So because he was crying and pleading, he continued. What a sadistic bastard Jose is. When he continued, did he hurt you more? I assume he did. I don't remember it afterwards. I remember the pain. I remember the him going into me. I remember the agony of the feeling and remember leaving my body. And I don't remember anything more about it until afterwards when he put a towel on my down on my bed. Mr. Menendez, did you have any devices that you used to cope with the molestation during your childhood years? Yes. What did you do? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. I would put cinnamon in his drinks. I would hide from him. I would shake on the floor. I would lie to him. I would urge myself up to fight him when he came into the room and psych myself up to attack him when he entered the room, different ways to keep myself from hating myself. How would you hide from him? I had a bed that was in the middle of the room, and he would open the door, and I would hide behind the bed or I'd hide in the closet. Would he look for you if he didn't see you? Yes. Would he find you? Sometimes. Would he say or do anything to you after he found you? He thought it was funny. You think it's hilarious your own child is terrified of you that he hides from you. Hilarious. Super funny. What an asshole. Did he do anything to you? Sometimes he'd slap me. Sometimes he would just laugh and go on with it. Why were you hiding? You knew he'd find you. There were times when he didn't. So you tried anyway? Yes. He would lie. How would you lie to him? Sorry. How would you lie to him? I would tell him I was going to be up in my bedroom and not be there. I would just lie about where I was going to be when I was in the house, or I would lie about different activities that might precede it. Did the lying that you would utilize as a technique to your father work? Not really. You mentioned shake on the floor. What would shaking on the First of all, what do you mean by shaking on the floor? There were times when I couldn't handle the pain when he wasn't there, the feeling that I would have on myself, the hate that I would have with wanting to stop it, and when everything overwhelmed me. I would just lie down on the floor and curl up and shake and cry. And it was a way for me to feel like I was doing something. I was releasing the pain somehow, and in some way it just helped me. How did your father react to your shaking on the floor? He didn't know. This would happen after he left or before he came. This would happen when he wasn't even here sometimes. This would just happen when the emotion would overwhelm me at some point in the day. Didn't matter whether he was home or whether he wasn't. Did you ever contemplate taking your own life? Yes. When's the first time you thought about taking your own life? About a month or two after I first tried to run away. And what, strike that. I want to get back to that and finish with the other coping that you mentioned. You mentioned cinnamon. How would cinnamon be used as a way of coping with your father's molestation? It was just something that I heard in school changed the taste of him, so I tried. The taste of semen? Yes. And what would you do with respect to the cinnamon? He would need another cup of coffee, or when dinner was being made, I would offer to get him the cup of coffee, and when it was doing it, I would pour cinnamon into the coffee or into the tea, different things like that. Did it work? No. Did he not notice, like, the flavor of the cinnamon and everything and, like, get mad about? Maybe that's why he thought Kitty was poisoning him because Eric was putting cinnamon in all of his food. Did you do anything with respect to trying to dull your own senses because of the taste of semen? I used a lot of lemon on my food. Why did you use lemon? It allowed me not to taste anything else. Now, you indicated that you had tried to run away. When was the first time that you tried to run away? After the second time he came into my room for actual sex was in the summer of after my sixth grade had ended. How old are you at that time? 12. And where were you living? Pennington. Why is it that you decided to run away? I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle the empty feeling, the hate I had of myself. I didn't know what to do, and my life was at a point where I just hated myself for not stopping what was happening, and I was just too afraid. I thought that it was the only way out. Up to that point, Mr. Menendez, had you told anyone that your father had been molesting you? No. Now, where were you going to go? I didn't know. Did you actually run away? Yes. And did someone find you? My father. Relate to the jury the incident that occurred where you ran away. It was a summer day, and I packed my clothes in a backpack. I packed food in one of my lunch boxes, and I got in the canoe and I went across the lake. And across the lake there was a forest, and I went through the forest, and I just kept walking, and I knew there were other towns on the other side. What did you do? Did you make it to any towns? No, it got dark eventually, and I was still in the forest, and I started thinking about my brother, who I would never see again, and my mother, who would miss me and who would worry about me. And so I got very unsure of what I wanted, and I got afraid of the dark. And so I sat by a tree and I cried, and I thought about what I wanted to do, and I ate a little food, and I wasn't sure what to do. And then I heard my father's voice calling, and I called out to him. Remember, he was 12 at this time. He's a young child. Why would you call out to your father hearing his voice when you were attempting to run away from him? At that point, I wasn't sure that I wanted to run away anymore. It was at night and I was scared and I preferred my father's voice to all the strange noises in the forest. Did your father hear your voice? Yes. Did he find you? Yes. What did he do? He lifted me up off the ground, put me against the tree, and yelled and screamed at me. What kind of things did he say to you? He asked me, who did I think I was for trying to embarrass him? A cousin of mine was living at the house at that time. So he was more concerned not about Eric's safety, but about being embarrassed about by a cousin. The cousin is that Diane Vandermolen. Sorry, Diane Vandermolen. Yes. He asked me if I really thought I was going to be able to get away from him. He told me that he would take my life next time that I tried to run away, that I would never get away from him, that he'd find me. I just remember his face yelling at me, and I remember wishing I had not been so stupid as to try. Did your father communicate to you, Mr. Menendez, that you were never ever to tell about the molestation? Objection leading. Overruled. I believe you've already asked this question and he's already answered it, has he not? Mr. Levin says it's just a prelude to another one, Your Honor. Let's get to the next one. May I just ask that one too? The court says, all right, I think it's already been asked and answered. Mr. Levin says, was it clear to you that there was a family secret? My father said so. And had your father ever threatened your life before he found you in the woods? Yes. When was the first time that your father threatened your life? When I was 11. Was there a specific incident that occurred when your father had threatened you because he thought you had told someone that he was molesting you? Yes. And who was it that your father thought you had told was molesting you? He accused me of telling Lyle. Had you told Lyle Menendez that your father was molesting you? No. What happened when your father confronted you about this belief? He threw me around, hit me, told me that if I ever told Lyle again that he would take my life, that he would take Lyle's life. I'm not sure if it was on that time, if it was that time. He told me that he would take Velvet's life, who is their dog. Did you ever say, or did you say anything to Lyle Menendez after your father had confronted you when you were 11 years old? No. Why didn't you say something to Lyle Menendez at that time? I didn't. I was confused at what he was talking about. I hadn't told Lyle. I came to understand that Lyle had confronted Dad about whether Dad was doing these things in my room, but at that time, to that incident, I didn't know that, and I didn't have that type of relationship with Lyle. I wasn't able to communicate. I wasn't even going to bring it up. I didn't want Lyle to talk to Dad again if he had in the first place. Mr. Khan says, I would object as hearsay anything said by the defendant, Lyle Menendez. The court says, well, at this point, I don't know if the answer has referred to anything other than an understanding. I believe that he referred to in some fashion. That remark is stricken. The rest of the answer will stand. Mr. Levin says, at some point in time during the week before your parents' death, did you talk to Lyle Menendez about this very incident? Yes. And what day did that occur? Tuesday. What did you tell Lyle Menendez with respect to this incident on Tuesday? I asked him if he remembered it. I asked him if he remembered ever talking to Dad. And what did he say? No. I would object, says Mr. Khan. Move to strike anything said by the co-defendant as hearsay. The court says objection sustained. The answer is stricken. It's offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Then why did you sustain the objection if you're saying it's offered for the truth? Oh, he's saying it's offered for the truth and not, I don't know. Okay, whatever. Mr. Levin says, it's not offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor. It's just offered for the state of mind with respect to Erik Menendez. The court says, all right, then the court will receive that statement, and it's not being received for the truth of the matter of whatever was said, but just to reflect the state of mind of the witness who says it occurred. Okay, hold on. I gotta fix the blanket here. We're having blanket issues for the dog. Sorry about that. She always likes to be a part of the stream when she can. Mr. Levin says, when you were 12 years old, did your mother ever show concern about your private parts? Yes. And when I refer to your private parts, I'm talking about your penis. Did your mother do anything to you with respect to looking at your penis? Yes. What did your mother do? She sat me down on my bed, asked me to remove my pants, sometimes it was my shorts, and would examine me. When you say examine you, what would she do? She would look at my penis and my testicles and the areas surrounding. As a result of the molestation, did you have any sores or problems ever on your penis? Yes. What kind of sores? I had small blisters sometimes. What would your mother do? She would squeeze them. How long did this continue? Up until I moved to Princeton. Was there a time, Mr. Menendez, where your father had inserted his penis into your mouth to where he hurt the back of your throat? When I was young, he did that a lot. Was there a time when you saw a doctor because of that? No, it's there in the records. My specific memory of it is not there. So he says it's in the records, he just doesn't remember doing it. Do you remember seeing a doctor because of that throat injury, or you remember seeing records that indicate that you went to a doctor? Objection calls for hearsay. Sustained. Was it an often occurrence for you to see a doctor as a child? It's hard to answer that question. Would you see a doctor? Let me ask you, were there times when you had been physically injured and you had not been taken to the doctor? Yeah. Were there many times when you were bleeding and cut and you didn't go to a doctor as a child? Yes. Did you know of any doctor that you felt that you could tell that you had been molested with where you felt comfortable enough to talk to the doctor? I didn't feel comfortable enough to talk to anyone about that except for Andy, his cousin Andy. And when you say Andy, are you talking about your cousin Andy Cano? Yes. Did you tell Andy Cano that your father was molesting you? In a way. How old were you when you talked to Andy? 12 or 13. What did you tell him? I just told him, well, I asked him first. I was trying to find out at this point whether any other fathers did this with their sons, and I was going through a period where I just wasn't sure. And I asked him if his father had ever done these things. I asked him if his father had ever touched his penis before. What did he tell you? He said no. Did you go into specifics with Andy Cano about what your father was doing to you? No. I just told him that my father was hurting me. I told him that my father was touching me. His father had divorced his mother, and so he wasn't quite sure if it was normal or not. He wanted to ask. He wanted me to talk to his mother. Did your father have a certain activity that he performed with you where that was made clear to you that you were to never tell anyone of the molestation? Yes. And was this activity associated with a particular thing? Yes. What was the thing that it was associated with? A round mirror in my bedroom. Would you describe the mirror? It was a round mirror with spokes on it like a ship's wheel. Where was the mirror in your bedroom? Opposite my bed on my dresser, leaning against the wall. How old were you when the mirror was first employed by your father in any way? 13. And how long did it last? No, I'm sorry, I was in 5th grade. I was 11. 11 years old, right about the time when the sex turned violent? Yes. And how long did the mirror continue? With the ship's wheel? Yes. Up until we moved to Princeton. How old were you then? I was 15 and a half. What would your father do typically with a ship's mirror? Ship's type mirror? He would have me sit in a chair opposite the mirror and make me look into the mirror at myself. You would be sitting in a mirror facing the mirror? Yes. Where would your father be? Walking behind me back and forth. This would happen in your bedroom? Yes. And about how big with your hands was the mirror? It was about 3 feet in diameter. And he would tell you, look inside the mirror to look at yourself? Yes. What would your father say to you? He would ask me questions and I would have to answer his questions. What kind of questions would he ask you? Depending on what information he wanted. Often it was related to tennis, sometimes it was related to sex. As an example of the type of questions he would ask you related to tennis, what might he ask you? He would ask me how I played today. If I answered I played well and he said no, then I would be punished for that. How would you? I'm sorry, go ahead. But if I answered I played badly and that was the right answer, he would say, right. And what if you gave him an answer that he didn't want to hear? What would happen? I would have to hit myself. He would make him hit himself. How would you have to hit yourself? With my hand? How? I would just have to slap myself in the head. Would you have to slap yourself hard in the head or in your head hard? Yes. If you didn't hit yourself hard enough, would he do something? He'd hit me. What other kinds of questions would you ask? Or would he ask? Sorry. What other kinds of questions would he ask? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Were any of the questions that he asked you related to moles? Sorry, related to him molesting you? Yes. And what would he say to you? He'd ask me if I told anyone about what was happening, and I said no. He asked me what would happen if I told anyone, and I remember once saying you would hurt me, and he said wrong, and I hit myself. And he said, what would happen if I told anyone, and I said you would take my life, and he said right. Did you believe him? Yes. Why did you believe that your father would take your life? Because he would describe ways that he would take my life. His facial, I just believed him. I mean, he knew his father. He knew the anger, the wrath, the violence that was capable in his father. So to believe it when his father said that makes sense. How would he describe to you ways that he would take your life? He told me that he would tie me to a chair and he would beat me to death. He asked me if I'd ever seen the inside of a skull and that I would if I told anyone because he would smash my skull. He told me that he would go into details about different ways. And did this happen on more than one occasion? Oh, yes. So you had indicated before that at some point in time in your life you had thoughts of taking your own life after you had tried to run away. What thoughts of taking your own life did you have? I just thought about ending the pain, and probably the easiest way was to end my life. Did you ever think of specific ways that you would take your life? Yes. And what ways did you think of? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Did you ever have a little test for yourself to see whether or not you could continue on living? Yes. What was that at the time? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Your Honor, might we take a recess now? The court says, let's go on a little further. Mr. Levin says, all right, I just need one moment. I want to talk to you a little bit about tennis. Change the subject. Ms. Abramson says, excuse me, I'd like to change the subject. Ms. Abramson and Mr. Levin confer. Mr. Levin says, you recall during this trial, the prosecutor called as a witness one of your tennis coaches, Mr. Heffernan? Yes. And you heard his testimony that following the deaths of your parents that you had hired him to be your tennis coach. You heard that? I did. Was Mr. Heffernan the first tennis coach that you ever had? No. Over the course of your lifetime, could you estimate how many tennis coaches that you had? 40, 50 tennis coaches? And who paid for those tennis coaches? My father. Were you involved in tennis all your life, from the time that you indicated before to the jury to the time that you turned yourself in when you were in Israel? Yes. Was it continuously straight through? Were there any breaks stopping? After my parents died for about 2 months. But other than that, it was a continuous event in your life. Yes. So there was nothing weird about having a tennis coach for for Erik. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the tennis training that you were involved in, the kind of training that Mr. Heffernan described that you were involved with him. Was this typical of the type of training that you went through during your life when your parents were alive? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. Which training are you referring to? Where you had a coach and you would train for hours with the tennis coach? Yes. When was the first time you remember having a tennis coach? When I was 5, maybe 6. Was there ever a time that you didn't have a tennis coach? No. Was there ever a time that you had more than one tennis coach at a time? Yes. And how would that work where you'd have more than one? I would be in drills with one tennis coach on the days that I wasn't with him. I would be in private lessons or sessions with another tennis coach. And at one time in my life, I had three. So three coaches at once. Now, would you describe what it was like for you as a young child, a typical day when you were involved with tennis? Objection, irrelevant. Sustained. I'd like to be heard, Your Honor. Court says, okay. We'll take a recess and we'll discuss it with counsel and we'll resume in 5 minutes. Don't discuss the case with anyone and don't form any final opinions about it. We'll resume at 5 after 3. We'll ask that counsel remain. So the jury exits the courtroom, and we've got some arguments here. The court says to the witness, you may step down. Yes, the jury is out of the courtroom, Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, the relevancy with respect to evidence concerning Erik Menendez's lifetime of playing tennis is related to the prosecution's motive. Motive is not a necessary element of an offense, yet they choose to select one. One of the motives that they selected was that Erik Menendez took his parents' lives for money so that he could freely carouse the country as a playboy tennis player, that he could hire tennis coaches, that he would be free to do the things that he couldn't do when he was under the domination and control of his parents who were just living at home. And I believe that we have the right and obligation, and it is extremely relevant to put in perspective the opposition of that, the opposite inference of that, and that is that tennis coaches were the norm, that tennis coaches were part of Erik Menendez's life, that his parents were the ones that indoctrinated him to tennis, that his parents were the ones that set the rigid schedule for the tennis that he played, that the schedule that Erik Menendez set up with Mark Heffernan, the prosecution witness, was typical of the type of regimen that his father had used during his lifetime, and the evidence that's relevant to rebut and refute the motive and the inferences from the evidence that the prosecution offered. The court says, well, as to the latter purposes, that the tennis coaches were the norm and that the regimen that he embarked upon after he took his parents' lives was similar to what it was before. has already been covered by questions you've asked and answers given. As far as how you characterize this, this was the parents who did this, the parents who were responsible and things of that nature. That's irrelevant. He didn't take their lives because the parents made him play tennis. That's how you make it sound. That's what the motive was on this case. That's not what he's saying at all, Your Honor, and you're being completely disingenuous by making that argument. Mr. Levin says, no, no. The court says that has some reason or relevance in this case. Mr. Levin says the prosecution has offered evidence post crime spending, and within that evidence, they offered the fact that Erik Menendez hired a tennis coach. Exactly. He says, yes, I know that. He says, why did he hire a tennis coach? The court says, I understand that. Mr. Levin says, and he should be allowed to explain all the reasons why he hired a tennis coach. The court says, and the first reason is the life of a 6-year-old and taking lessons. That was the reason? Yeah, yeah, Judge. Mr. Levin says, well, the court says, that's how you propose to embark upon this inquiry. Mr. Levin says, why he hired a tennis coach is based on his lifetime involvement with tennis as it relates to his particular life. We didn't want this evidence in. We didn't ask that it be introduced, but we have an obligation to refute it. The court says, I don't dispute that you have an obligation to refute it, but the nature of the evidence that you're offering doesn't refute it, doesn't prove anything. I disagree, Judge. Mr. Levin says it disproves the prosecution's theory. Otherwise, the jury will not know in context why did Erik Menendez ever hire Mark Heffernan at tens of thousands of dollars per year to train him. The court says to go through what I expect from the nature of that first question is a lengthy examination of all his activities in tennis and all the coaching and all the ways he was coached. They keep spelling couched, by the way, that he was couched, and the manner of coaching doesn't prove this. Mr. Levin says, I'm not. The court says all it requires is one or two questions and answers that you already had two of them as to whether or not he had so many coaches over his life and who paid for them. And this was the norm, that this sort of particular regimen was the norm. It doesn't require you to go into the life of a 6-year-old or 8-year-old and explain how he conducted himself taking lessons at that age. Ms. Abramson says, if I may be heard for a moment to suggest something to my colleague. So they confer. Mr. Levin says, Your Honor, I don't intend to dwell on this particular area. What I want to establish is that Erik Menendez had a life of competitive tennis. To the degree I asked a couple of questions, I did, but I haven't connected it to the reason why he hired Mark Heffernan, which I now wish to do, and also the fact that Erik Menendez will testify that following his parents' death, he didn't know what to do, and that the only thing that he knew how to do was play tennis as a result of his lifetime of being involved in competitive sports, and he was lost without it, and that's what he wants to tell the jury. The court says he can say that. Mr. Levin says he wants to explain why he hired Mark Heffernan. The court says, okay, you can ask him, why did you do that? Ms. Abramson says, can he ask him? The court says the way you're proposing it is, by the nature of that last question, entirely irrelevant. Mr. Levin says, well, I think it's relevancy. Court says, I don't want to discuss it. I've told you the question you asked was asked for information that was totally irrelevant. Now the questions you've just indicated you propose to ask do deal with relevant information. Mr. Levin says, all right, I understand. Court says, that's how I look at it. And it's not going to get into every detail of his life or playing tennis and things of that nature. But if it has relevance, well, it has to do with certain tournaments that were involved in testimony we've heard or evidence relating to Heffernan, things of that nature. Clearly, it's admissible and relevant, but the last question was not. Okay, we'll be in recess until 5 after recess was taken. What was the point of that? Like, really, seriously, you could have just let him ask the question. It wasn't that difficult. It's not that far out of relevancy, to be asked and to get him to the next question. Like, Why are we here? Just having these stupid sidebars and fighting so gosh darn hard because the state objects to something. And for some reason, they don't want any of the abuse stuff to come in. And that's it's getting to pile up that certain things aren't allowed to be brought in. The whole tennis part of their upbringing was abusive. So, and he said he's not going to get into the whole thing, but you should be able to get into how his parents treated him, how Jose treated him when it came to tennis, how they were um, basically forced into playing for hours and hours and hours at a time, training for hours at a time, doing these tournaments, being in the heat with no food, and just going until they were empty every day. And any free time that they had when they weren't in school, they were doing tennis. So it's a very huge part of who the brothers were, who how the parents controlled the brothers because they forced them into that. It's not like they, had a choice in any of it. So they were told pick a sport. You're going to do a sport here, pick a sport whether they wanted to or not. And so they were basically kind of forced into it. And Eric said on the stand that he only chose tennis because Lyle was into tennis. So he just thought it was easier that way. He didn't want to be a burden. So he's like, I'll just do tennis because somebody else in the house is already doing tennis, type of mentality. So there was no free will in that house for the brothers. And all of it was forced by Jose. So all of it should be relevant. But Judge Stanley Weisberg sees things when it comes to the law in this case very differently than logic and reason seem to. But, anyways, that is where I will leave you for today. Thank you for watching. We will continue tomorrow with more Erik Menendez on the stand. So, thank you again, and I will see you later. Please don't forget to hit the like on your way out. Bye, guys.